Hello everyone, welcome to Whizlabs. My name is Praveen and today we'll talk about how to prepare for AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam and clear it in first attempt. So as you all know, from 1st of July, we were having new version of this exam. This version of exam includes updated content across the skills such as databases, cost optimization, and security. AWS regularly update this exam to reflect the pace of innovation on the platform and latest best practice in AWS cloud. So without further ado, let's discuss the agenda for today's class. First, we will see some doubts or questions from an absolute beginner. Then we will discuss what are the expectations from a certified solutions architect. We will see the exam details. Then we will discuss the content outline of the exam. Then we will divide the service in certain categories. We will discuss these services based on the exam. I will also talk about some new services added in this new version of exam. We'll talk about some references. We'll talk about some exam tips. And finally, we will conclude this session with few questions. So let's see some questions or doubts from an absolute beginner. Am I eligible for the Solutions Architect exam? Answer is yes. Anyone can appear for this Solutions Architect exam. Do I need any programming background to pass this exam? Answer is no. You do not need any type of programming background to pass this exam. How should I start preparing for this exam? What are the best courses available in the market to prepare for this exam? How much time it will take to prepare for the exam? Out of this many services, which service should I really have to focus on? And finally, what would be the expectation from a solutions architect exam in the industry? So we will answer all your questions. So let's start with the expectations from a solutions architect associate. He or she should able to understand the technical and business aspect of the application. They should able to design and architect technical solutions and services by choosing the best and cost efficient services. They should able to design and deploy high available, cost efficient, fault tolerant and scalable system on AWS cloud. They should able to understand the technical requirement and identify the service which will fulfill the request. And finally, along with the understanding of global infrastructure, they should be having hands-on experience related to the networking, storage, database, deployment, and management. Let's talk about the exam details now. The format of the question will be multiple choice and multiple answer. It means you have to select the correct one among the multiple options. We all know that it's an associate level exam. We give this exam in testing centers, but due to this COVID situation, we can appear for this exam in our home as well. The time allotted for this exam is 130 minutes, but if you are non-English speaker, then you can request for another 30 minutes. But you can only avail this facility once you register for the exam. The cost of the exam is $150 and practice exam will be of $20. Let's talk about the content outline and domain breakup for this exam. Domain 1 is designing resilient architecture and 30% of question comes from this domain. Domain 2, designing high performing architecture, and weightage for this domain is 28%. Domain 3, designing secure applications and architecture, weightage for this domain is 24%. And finally, designing cost optimized architecture allotted 18%. Now, very important part. Out of 165 plus services, which service should I really have to focus on? Here, we have divided all the services on the categories. So let's see some services based on the categories one by one. First is compute category, where EC2, Lambda, Beanstalk, Elastic Container Service, Elastic Kubernetes Service comes under this category. Storage, S3, Redshift, Storage Gateway, Elastic File System, Glacier, and Lustre comes in this category. In networking category, VPC, Virtual Private Cloud, Route 53, API Gateway, and CloudFront comes under this category. Identity Access and Management, Key Management Service, Cognito comes under security category. OpsWork, Cost Explorer, CloudTrail, CloudWatch comes under governance. DynamoDB, RDS, Elasticache, and Redshift comes under database. We were having several services in application such as SNS, SQS, SWF, DataSync, DMS, and we were having some miscellaneous service as well, such as Athena, Kinesis, Glue, Shield, EMR, etc. Now, do we need to know all these services thoroughly? To answer this, we will go to the next slide. In this slide, we have divided all these services in three categories. First category is core services. I would say if you know AWS, you should know these services. I will further say these services are the big backbone of AWS. And you should know in and out of these services along with the hands-on experience of these services. Second category is advanced services. Hands-on experience is also required for these services so that you can able to answer the question in the exam. Most of the questions come from these two categories. And the last category is other services. Here you should be having basic understanding of these services, but if you do not have any hands-on experience in these services, that would also be fine. Now, let's see some new services introduced in this exam. AWS Global Accelerator, Elastic Fabric Adapter, Amazon FSx Service, AWS Data Sync Service, AWS Directory Service, Elastic Network Adapter Service, and AWS Parallel Cluster Service. So let's talk about some core services and the topics which you should go through. First is IAM, Identity Access and Management. Here you should know about users, groups, roles and policies. You should aware of security token services, identity providers such as SAML, OpenID Connect, and you should know IAM best practices. Let's talk about the storage service. S3, which stands for simple storage service. You should aware of all the classes of S3, properties of S3 such as versioning, object lock, encryption, etc. You should know what is signed URL, what is course configuration, bucket policy, transfer acceleration, replication, lifecycle policy, and access point. Now we will talk about EC2 instance, Elastic Compute Cloud. You should know about different pricing models of EC2 instance. You should know the components of EC2 such as instance types, EBS, snapshots, etc. You should aware of the usage of elastic IP addresses, security groups, and you should be having hands-on experience in load balancer and auto-scaling group. Now we will see what is virtual private cloud. Here you should aware about the components of VPC such as subnets, route table, and internet gateway. When to use NAT gateway or NAT instance. You should aware of VPC peering, what is transit gateway, usage of endpoints, what is egress only internet gateway, and what is private link. And finally, in core services, we will talk about Route 53. You don't need to know a lot about Route 53. You should know what is hosted zone. You should aware of different routing policies and use cases. You should also aware about alias and non-alias and types of record in hosted zone. Now we are done with the core services. Let's see some advanced services. First is Lambda. You should aware of the programming languages which are supported by Lambda. You should aware of the use cases, triggers, memory, concurrency, and a basic troubleshooting. You should also have hands-on experience in this service. Let's talk about Beanstalk. You should aware of the use cases, platform supported, and deployment policies. If we will talk about EFS, you should aware of different performance mode. You should aware of storage classes, throughput mode, data transfer, and backup. Let's talk about DynamoDB now. You should know about the features of DynamoDB, what is primary key, indexes, consistency model, DynamoDB accelerator, and throughput model. Let's see few more advanced services. CloudFormation. You should aware of basics of CloudFormation and their use cases. CloudWatch. You should aware of what is CloudWatch dashboard, CloudWatch events, log groups, and alarms. If I'll talk about RDS, you should know what are the types of RDS available in AWS, what is manual backup, what is automated backup, what is replica and read replica, and their use cases. If I'll talk about simple queue services and simple notification services, you should aware of use cases, features, and functionalities. We have already discussed about the other services in the previous slides. I repeat, from other services, you should need to know the basics only. If you are not having hands-on experience in that services, that will also be fine. Let's talk about some study material or references that you should go through before the exam. What are the security best practices in the cloud? It is important for the cloud folks to know about it. We should aware of all the AWS design principles, AWS pillars, and it is good to refer white paper, especially well-architected framework, and frequently asked questions of few services. Let's see some security best practices in the cloud. You should be aware of shared responsibility model for security. Use multi-factor authentication. Limit your security group. Rotate your keys regularly. Limited access, and grant the least possible privileges possible for the application users. You should also aware of AWS design principles, and here the design principles are: implement automation, stop guessing your capacity, test system at production scale, implement loose coupling between the components, focus on services, not servers, be sure to remove single point of failure. It means your application should be highly available and fault tolerant. You should aware of AWS pillars, and those are operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. These are the core fundamentals that you should keep in your mind while answering the questions. Now let's see some tips and suggestions. Your first step should be sign up for AWS free tier account and practice regularly. Set a target date for your exam. Complete Whizlabs video course, practice hands-on lab, and attempt Whizlabs practice test. Do not try to memorize everything, try to understand the underlying concept. As I mentioned earlier, you can give this exam in online proctored center or from your home as well. You can schedule the exam any day and any time in the week. Choose the time slot which will work best for you. And then you can attempt Whizlabs final test. I would suggest giving this final test 2-3 days before the actual exam. And at last, yet very important, exercise regularly and sleep well. Maintain your physical and mental health. Now let's conclude this session with a few questions. Here's the question number 1. A company runs a public-facing 3-tier web application in a VPC across multiple availability zones. Amazon EC2 instances for the application tier running in private subnets need to download software patches from the internet. However, the instances cannot be directly accessible from the internet. Which actions should be taken to allow the instances to download the needed patches? And here we have to select two options. Let's see the options now. Configure a NAT gateway in a public subnet. Define a custom route table with a route to the NAT gateway for internet traffic and associate it with the private subnet for the application tier. Assign elastic IP addresses to the application instances. Define a custom route table with a route to the internet gateway for internet traffic and associate it with the private subnet for the application tier. Configure a NAT instance with a private subnet. This question belongs to core services, where you should know about the services thoroughly. So let's try to understand this question with a diagram. Here, this private application servers need to download the patches. So as this server is in private subnet and this private subnet is not connected to the internet gateway directly, due to this reason, this private subnet will not be having internet access. So what should we do? The internet to access in the private subnet, we have to use NAT. So what is the solution? We have to create a NAT in a public subnet. Then we will create a custom route table or secondary route table. We will associate this secondary route table with the private subnet, and finally we will route to the NAT, due to which we can access the internet in the private subnet. So here the correct option will be A and B. Let's see the question number 2. An organization planning to use AWS for their production rollout want to implement automation for deployment such that it will automatically create a LAMP stack, download the latest PHP installable from S3, and set up the ELB. Which of the mentioned AWS services meets the requirement for making an orderly deployment of the software? AWS Elastic Beanstalk, AWS CloudFront, AWS CloudFormation, and AWS DevOps. So this question belongs to advanced services, and you should know which services will fulfill this request. Here we can clearly eliminate AWS DevOps because we do not have any service named AWS DevOps. AWS CloudFormation is also not an option because CloudFormation is used for infrastructure as a code. AWS CloudFront is also a CDN service which will not fulfill this request. So the answer will be AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which will fulfill this request. Let's see the question number 3. A company stores data for on-premise application on local drives. The CTO wants to reduce the cost by storing the data in S3 but does not want to make the changes to the applications. To minimize the latency, frequently accessed data should be available locally. What would be the efficient solution? Deploy an SFTP client on a local server and transfer data to Amazon S3 using AWS Transfer for SFTP. Deploy an AWS Storage Gateway, Volume Gateway configured in cached volume mode. Deploy an AWS Data Sync agent on a local server and configure an S3 bucket as the destination. And last is deploy an AWS Storage Gateway, Volume Gateway configured in the stored volume mode. This question belongs to other services. And if you know the basics of the services, that will also be fine. As per the questions, they do not want to move their whole application to the cloud, but they want to store the data in the cloud because they want to reduce the cost. This question belongs to storage gateway. But to minimize the latency, frequently accessed data should be available locally is the key. So this will be fulfilled by cached volume mode. So answer will be B. Deploy an AWS Storage Gateway Volume Gateway configured in cached volume mode. So that's all from our side, guys. Thank you very much.